My wife cheated on me with our divorce lawyer, and now she's trying to claim the $250, $0 inheritance I received after her affair was exposed. Has anyone ever fought a betrayal like this over property rights? I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to catch my wife cheating on me, especially not in the most insane way possible. One night, I was just minding my own business, scrolling through my emails after a long day, when I stumbled upon a message that made my stomach drop. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the name attached to it was unmistakable: our divorce lawyer. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. How does that even happen? Well, that's exactly what I found out. Turns out my wife Lisa had been screwing around with her lawyer, and not just a little bit. It wasn't just a quick fling. They'd been sneaking around for months, and the worst part, I had no idea. Lisa had always been a bitchy, manipulative woman. She loved to twist every situation to her advantage. She'd lie about small things, blow things out of proportion, and somehow make it seem like I was the one at fault. She'd always been a master at hiding her true colors, but this time I saw through her bullshit. I saw the text messages, the photos she thought I'd never find, her in bed with that guy, Mark, our divorce lawyer, in hotel rooms, at her office, even in our own house when she thought I was out of town. I was stunned. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this? How could she betray me like that, especially with someone who was supposed to help us sort out our divorce? The first thing I did was go through her phone again, just to be sure. I found more than I wanted: messages filled with sexual innuendos, plans to meet up, even her bragging about how hot Mark was and how he knew what to do. It was disgusting. I felt sick, but I also felt a burning rage building inside me. I didn't want to just confront her and yell. I wanted to make her understand that she'd crossed a line that could never be erased. But I also knew I needed to keep my cool, at least until I had all the facts straight. Still, I couldn't believe I'd been living with a woman who was cheating on me with our own divorce lawyer. That's some twisted shit right there. The next day I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I called her at work, her office actually, since she was always bragging about how successful she was, and told her I knew everything. Her reaction? Oh, it was classic Lisa. She started crying, claiming she didn't know what I was talking about, that the messages must have been fake, that I was paranoid. She tried to say it was just sex, nothing serious, that she still loved me, but I knew better. I could see through her lies. She was trying to smooth things over, but I wasn't having it. I told her I'd be home soon and we needed to talk face to face. When I finally got home that evening, she had the nerve to act innocent, like she hadn't been caught with her pants down. She kept insisting it was just sex, that Mark was a bad influence, and that she didn't mean for it to go this far. That's when I lost it. How could she lie so easily? How could she throw away our marriage over some meaningless sex? I never thought I'd feel so betrayed, so humiliated. I felt like a fool for trusting her, for thinking we had a real future. And all the while she kept spinning her web of lies, trying to paint herself as the victim. But I saw through her. I saw the truth behind her bitchy. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, trying to process everything. I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. Part of me wanted to confront her again, to make her pay, but another part said I should just walk away. I was hurt, yes, but I also knew that if I let her get away with this, it would eat me up inside forever. I had to take control. I had to plan my next move carefully, because this wasn't just about her cheating. It was about the entire foundation of our marriage crumbling beneath my feet. I needed to think, to figure out how to handle this mess, especially considering the money involved. That's when I remembered the inheritance I'd recently received, $250 from my late uncle. I knew Lisa would try to claim some of it, especially now that she saw it as a bargaining chip, so I had to be ready for her. I wasn't going to let her take what wasn't hers, especially not after she'd betrayed me like this. But that's a story for another time. For now, I just kept replaying everything in my head, trying to stay calm. I knew one thing: the next step was going to be crucial. I had to protect myself, my assets, and make sure she didn't screw me over in the process. I'd been naive once, but no more. Trust was broken, and the revenge I was planning would be sweet. Just wait. The next few days were a whirlwind. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep, and couldn't stop thinking about how Lisa had betrayed me. That bitch had always been manipulative, but seeing her with Mark, our lawyer, that was a whole new level. It wasn't just a fling. She'd been sneaking around for months, lying to my face every time I asked how her day was. I kept replaying that moment. I found her phone, her messages, the photos. Every detail burned into my mind. I felt humiliated, furious, and honestly, a little numb. But underneath all that, I knew I had to act fast. One night, I sat down with my laptop and started digging into her financials. Lisa liked to act like she was the smart one, the one who had everything under control, but I found out she'd been hiding a lot. Turns out, she'd been draining some of our joint accounts, funneling money into secret accounts, and even buying some expensive jewelry behind my back. She thought she was clever, but I had her figured out now. I also discovered that she'd been pushing for a quick divorce, probably to get her hands on my inheritance, which she knew I'd received after her affair was exposed. That's when I remembered the $250, $0 I inherited from my Uncle Jim. That was a lot of money, and I knew Lisa would try to claim it or at least use it as leverage, so I started planning. My goal was simple. I wanted to make sure she didn't get a penny of that inheritance, especially not after what she'd done. First, I needed to secure it legally. I reached out to my lawyer, an old friend I'd known for years, to get advice on how to protect my assets. I explained the situation, and he told me I'd need to set up a trust or some kind of legal shield around the inheritance. I also wanted to make sure Lisa couldn't just claim it in a divorce settlement. She'd been so bitchy and manipulative before, I knew she'd try to spin some story to get her hands on it. I wasn't going to let that happen. Meanwhile, Lisa was still playing the victim. She'd call me crying, telling me how sorry she was, how she loved me so much and didn't want to lose everything. She'd lie and lie, trying to make me feel guilty, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I saw her for what she was, a selfish, manipulative woman who'd stab me in the back for a quick buck or some meaningless sex. She kept insisting that she deserved half of everything, even trying to claim that her affair was just a mistake, and that I should forgive her. Yeah, right. I told her I'd think about it, but I knew I'd never trust her again, and I definitely wasn't going to let her walk away with my inheritance. I also started gathering evidence to back up my case. I printed out all her messages, saved emails, took screenshots of her bank statements showing her secret accounts, and even hired a private investigator to follow her around a bit. I wanted to be prepared for whatever she threw at me. I knew she'd try some kind of legal stunt, maybe claim that she had a right to some of the inheritance because she was married to me, even though we were heading for divorce. But I had a feeling that if I played my cards right, I could keep everything I'd earned and inherited. I also talked to a lawyer about how to handle the divorce itself. I wanted full custody of the house and the money, and I wanted to make sure Lisa's financial manipulations didn't screw me over. The lawyer told me I should file for an official separation, get a restraining order if needed, and make sure my assets were protected before the proceedings even started. I didn't want her pulling some stunt to claim half of everything just because she was my wife. I knew she'd lie and manipulate her way into as much as she could, but I was determined not to let her. Honestly, the emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, angry, and just exhausted. Every time I thought about how she had lied to me, cheated on me, and now was trying to take my inheritance, I wanted to explode. But I also knew I had to stay calm. Revenge, I decided, would come later. Right now, I just needed to get my ducks in a row. I had to protect what was mine, and I had to show her that I wasn't going to be played for a fool. One thing was clear: Lisa was relentless. She kept pushing for a quick divorce, kept insisting she was the victim, and kept lying about everything. But I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. I knew her tricks. She'd always been good at spinning stories, making herself look innocent while she schemed behind the scenes. This time I had the evidence, the legal advice, and the determination to fight back. I wasn't just going to roll over and let her walk away with my money, my house, and any part of my inheritance. Not a chance. So I kept working. I set up the legal protections, hired the PI, gathered all the documents. I wasn't sure how it was going to play out, but I knew one thing for certain. Lisa's bitchy, manipulative attitude wasn't going to get her anywhere. She might think she's smart, but I was already several steps ahead. And when I finally executed my plan, she'd realize just how badly she'd underestimated me. I was done being the naive husband. Now, I was the one in control. Over the next couple of weeks, I threw myself into the legal mess. I knew Lisa would come at me with everything she had once she realized I was serious about protecting my assets. She'd always been good at playing the victim, spinning stories and twisting facts to her advantage. That's why I made sure I had all the evidence, her secret bank accounts, the messages with Mark, even her attempts to manipulate friends and family into sympathizing with her. I wanted to be ready for the worst, because I knew her kind of bitchy manipulativeness wouldn't stop. Just because I confronted her, she'd fight dirty and I had to be prepared. I also started to set up the legal protections around my inheritance. I contacted a trust lawyer, and we worked out a plan to put the $250, $0 into a trust that she couldn't access without my approval. I knew she'd try to claim she was entitled to some of it, especially since she kept lying about how we were married and entitled to everything I had. But I had the receipts, the bank statements, and the legal advice. I also made sure that my will and estate plans were updated to reflect my wishes, so if anything happened to me, she wouldn't be able to muscle her way into my inheritance. I wasn't about to let her take what I worked for, especially not after everything she'd done. Meanwhile, Lisa was still acting like she was the innocent victim. She'd cry on the phone, try to guilt me into saving our marriage, and insist that her affair was just a mistake, a bad decision, she'd say. She'd lie about Mark, claiming he was just a friend that she never intended for it to get serious. But I saw through her bullshit. I knew she was lying just like she always did. Her bitchy attitude only got worse when I told her I was protecting my money and that I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her. I wanted to see if she was still sneaking around, trying to contact Mark or anyone else. Sure enough, I caught her meeting with him again, in a hotel room last weekend. She thought she was being sneaky, but I had the proof. That was the final nail in the coffin for her story that she was just trying to work things out. No, she was still playing her games, still lying and scheming. I was furious, but I kept my cool. I knew that once I had everything in order, I could confront her with the evidence and put an end to her manipulations. I also started planning my next move in the divorce proceedings. I filed for separation, making sure I kept the house and the inheritance protected. I talked to my lawyer about how to handle her attempts to claim part of my assets, and he recommended pushing for full custody of our house and the inheritance, citing her infidelity and her manipulative behavior as grounds. I knew she'd try to spin it as marital hardship, but I had enough proof to show her true nature. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about money or property. It was about her trying to screw me over to cover her own ass. Honestly, I felt like I was in a war. Every time I thought I had a handle on things, she'd come back with some new lie or scheme. But I wasn't going to let her win. I'd been naive once, but not anymore. I was ready to fight, legally and emotionally. I knew that once I got everything sorted, she'd have no choice but to face the consequences of her actions, and I was prepared for whatever came next. The final piece of my plan was to make sure she didn't get anywhere near the inheritance. I had a feeling she'd try to claim it as part of our marriage assets, but I wasn't going to let her. I started working with my lawyer on setting up a legal shield around the money, making it clear that it was a separate estate, not part of our joint assets. I also planned to file for a formal divorce quickly, to prevent her from dragging things out and trying to manipulate the system in her favor. I knew she'd be bitchy about it, trying to delay or stall, but I was ready for her. That's when I realized how much I'd underestimated her, how manipulative and bitchy she could be when she thought she could get away with something. But I also learned that I had the strength to stand up for myself. I was tired of being the naive husband who trusted his wife too much. Now I was taking control, protecting what was mine, and making sure she wouldn't get a single cent of my inheritance or property. The game was on, and I was ready to win. The legal preparations took up most of my time, but the real chaos started once I began confronting Lisa with the evidence. I remember the day I decided I'd had enough. I called her at her office and told her I was coming. Her tone was bitchy and defensive from the start, as if she knew she'd been caught but still wanted to deny everything. When I arrived, she immediately started with her bullshit, crying and insisting she didn't mean for it to get this bad, that Mark was just a confidant, and that I was overreacting. She looked at me with those cold, bitchy eyes and tried to play innocent, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I laid out all the evidence I had gathered, screenshots of her messages, photos from the hotel, bank statements, and even the Pie's report. I watched her squirm as I detailed her lies, and her face turned red with anger and frustration. She kept trying to spin some story about how it was just sex, that she was sorry, and that she still loved me. But I knew better. I told her that her lies didn't work anymore, that I had enough proof to bury her in court if I needed to. I also informed her that I'd protected my inheritance and she wouldn't be touching a dime of it. Her bitchy attitude only got worse. She started yelling, claiming I was trying to control her, that I was jealous, that I was just insecure. She threw a fit trying to make me feel guilty, saying I was ruining our family. I told her she was the one who ruined everything with her lies and her affair. That's when she snapped, calling me paranoid and possessive, and claiming I was just jealous of Mark because he was better in bed. That was the moment I realized she was just trying to distract me, to make me doubt myself. But I had enough. I told her I was done with her manipulations and that I was going to protect my assets and move on. Once she saw I was serious, her bitchy cracked just a little. She started crying again, but this time it was different, more of a manipulative, desperate cry. She begged me not to ruin her, to let her fix things, but I wasn't falling for it. I knew her game. I told her I'd give her a chance to be honest and to stop lying, but I made it clear that I was done playing her games. I was tired of her bullshit, and I was going to do whatever it took to keep my inheritance and property safe. That day marked a turning point. I filed for divorce that same week, with full custody of the house and control over my assets. I also put the legal protections in place to shield my inheritance from any claims she might try to make. I knew she'd try to spin it as marital property, but I had the legal advice to back me up. The lawyer told me I should also consider a restraining order, since her bitchy attitude was turning more aggressive, and I didn't want her showing up unannounced or trying to intimidate me. I was ready for that fight if she wanted to take it there. Meanwhile, Lisa was still trying to save face. She kept calling me, crying, begging, claiming she'd change, that she'd stop seeing Mark, and that she'd do anything to keep her marriage. I let her talk, but I didn't respond much anymore. I'd been burned too many times by her lies. I was just waiting for the court process to play out, knowing that once the divorce was finalized, I'd have full control over everything. But I also knew this wasn't over yet. She'd probably keep trying to manipulate, lie, and maybe even escalate her bitchiness to get what she wanted. What really hit me hard was the realization that I'd been so blind. I trusted her, loved her, thought we had something real. But her bitchy, manipulative side had been hiding behind that pretty face all along. Now I saw her for what she really was, a selfish, lying woman who'd cheat, lie, and manipulate her way through life if she thought she could get away with it. And I was done being her fool. I also started to think about my inheritance more seriously. I had the legal protections in place, but I knew she'd try to claim some of it in the divorce settlement. That's why I hired a specialist to help me draft the trust and estate plans, making it clear that the money was separate and protected. I knew she'd try to spin some story about how we were married, but I had the proof that the inheritance was mine alone, and I was prepared to fight her in court if needed. That money was my safety net, my way out of her bitchy manipulations, and I wasn't going to let her take it from me. This whole ordeal has been a brutal wake-up call. I've learned that trust is fragile and that some people, like Lisa, are willing to lie, cheat, and manipulate just to get what they want. But I've also learned that I can stand up for myself. I'm not going to let her control the narrative anymore. I've got the evidence, the legal protections, and the resolve to see this through. When the dust settles, I'll come out stronger, and she'll be the one left with nothing but her own lies and bitchiness. The divorce process finally started moving forward, but Lisa's bitchy attitude only intensified. She was furious that I'd gone so far to protect my assets and to shield my inheritance from her grasp. She kept calling, trying to manipulate the situation, playing the victim again, claiming I was trying to ruin her life and punish her for something she didn't mean to do. She even accused me of being heartless for wanting to keep what I'd earned and inherited. Honestly, I was sick of her crying, her lies, and her bitchy attitude. I'd seen her true colors now, and I wasn't going to let her win. I made sure to keep all the evidence organized, her messages, bank statements, the PIES report, and the legal documents. I worked closely with my lawyer to prepare for the court hearings. The goal was clear: get full custody of the house, protect my inheritance, and keep her from claiming any part of my estate. I also filed for a restraining order after she showed up at my house unannounced, screaming and crying, trying to manipulate me into changing my mind. The court granted it, and that was a relief. I needed to keep her bitchy antics away from me, especially when I was trying to focus on rebuilding my life. Meanwhile, Lisa kept trying her tricks. She accused me of abandoning her, even though I'd been nothing but honest and straightforward. She'd tell anyone who'd listen that I was jealous, that I was trying to control her, and that I was ruining her reputation. But I didn't care about her lies anymore. All I cared about was making sure I kept my money, my property, and my peace of mind. The more she bitchily threw her tantrums, the clearer it became that she was just trying to manipulate her way into a better position, probably hoping I'd back down or give her some kind of settlement. I also made it a point to stay calm around her, even when she was at her bitchiest. I refused to get into shouting matches or let her see me get angry. I knew her game. She thrived on control and chaos. So I stayed composed, kept my legal team close, and kept my focus on the bigger picture, protecting what was mine and making sure she didn't get a dime of my inheritance or property, no matter how bitchy or manipulative she got. One day, she showed up at my place again, this time with a lawyer of her own, trying to intimidate me into settling for less. She was bitchy, aggressive, and full of lies about how we were still married and entitled to half of everything. I told her flat out that her bullshit wasn't going to work this time. I had the evidence, the legal protections, and the court orders to back me up. I also reminded her that her affair and manipulative attitude were going to be highly relevant in court, especially when it came to custody and property division. It was a tense meeting, but I held my ground. I told her she could keep playing her bitchy games, but I wasn't backing down. I was done being the naive husband who trusted her. Now, I was the one in charge, making sure she couldn't manipulate her way into my money or my life. I knew she'd keep trying to spin her stories, but I was prepared for that. I had the evidence, the legal support, and a clear plan to move forward. The worst part, watching her bitchy attitude turn into outright rage when she realized she wasn't getting her way. She yelled, cursed, and threw tantrums, trying to threaten me with some bogus legal claim or some sob story about how I was ruining her life. But I just stayed calm. I knew her tricks, and I knew I had the upper hand. I had already protected my inheritance, secured full custody of the house, and got the restraining order. She was running out of options, and I was running out of patience for her bitchiness. Looking back, I realize how much I've grown through this ordeal. I used to trust her blindly, but now I see the truth. Some people are just manipulative and selfish, and they'll do anything, including lying, cheating, and throwing tantrums, to get what they want. I've learned that protecting yourself and your assets is crucial, especially when dealing with a bitchy wife like Lisa. I've also learned that staying calm and sticking to your legal rights is the best way to handle manipulative people. Now, I'm just waiting for the final court date. I know Lisa will keep bitching and trying to manipulate her way out of this, but I've got everything in order. She can scream and cry all she wants, but at the end of the day, she won't get her hands on my inheritance or my house. She'll have to face the consequences of her actions, and I'll finally be able to move on. That's what matters most, to finally close this chapter and rebuild my life without her bitchy, manipulative presence hanging over me. The court date finally arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air. Lisa showed up with her new lawyer, looking bitchier than ever, trying to throw her weight around and act like she still had some kind of advantage. She was full of her usual lies, claiming she deserved half of everything, that she was entitled to my inheritance because we were married, and that I was trying to cheat her out of her rights. But I was ready. I had all the evidence, the legal protections, and the fact that I'd done everything by the book. During the hearing, I laid out the case clearly. I presented all the documentation proving that the inheritance was mine alone, that I'd set up a trust to protect it, and that her manipulative, bitchy attitude had caused irreparable damage to our marriage. I explained how her affair with Mark, our divorce lawyer, was just the last straw, proof of her manipulative, selfish nature. The judge listened carefully, took notes, and asked questions. I could see Lisa squirming in her seat, realizing her manipulations weren't going to fly this time. My lawyer argued that Lisa's behavior was a clear indication of her manipulative and bitchy attitude, which should weigh against her in custody and property decisions. He also emphasized that the inheritance was legally protected and that her attempts to claim it were unfounded. After what felt like hours, the judge finally made the ruling: full custody of the house to me, the inheritance protected and placed in a trust that Lisa had no access to, and a restraining order keeping her away from me and my property. When the judge announced the decision, Lisa's bitchy mask cracked for a moment and she looked furious. She shouted some insults, claiming she'd appeal, but deep down I knew it was over. The court had spoken and I'd won. I felt a huge wave of relief wash over me. It was like finally exhaling after holding my breath for months. After the hearing, I took a moment outside the courthouse to breathe. I looked at the sky, feeling a strange mix of emptiness and liberation. I'd been betrayed in the worst way possible, but I'd fought back and won. I realized I'd learned a lot through this nightmare, about trust, about protecting what's yours, and about the importance of standing up for yourself, no matter how bitchy or manipulative the other person gets. Lisa tried to approach me afterward, crying and begging for another chance, but I just shook my head. I told her she'd burned every bridge and that I didn't want her in my life anymore. She called me cold, bitchy, and heartless, everything I'd come to expect, but I didn't care. I'd already moved past the pain and I was finally ready to rebuild. Looking back, I see this whole ordeal as a brutal lesson. Trusting blindly only left me vulnerable to her manipulative ways. Protecting my assets, being prepared, and standing my ground made all the difference. She was the manipulative, bitchy wife who thought she could get away with everything, but I proved her wrong. The inheritance is safe, the house is mine, and I can finally breathe without her toxic presence hanging over me. So here I am now, finally free. I've learned that sometimes you have to fight dirty to protect what's yours. Trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and never underestimate how manipulative some people can be when they're desperate. Most of all, don't let anyone, especially a bitchy wife, take you for granted. Because in the end, the truth always comes out and justice will find its way.